Now let's talk about response substitution. So this is going to be applying operant conditioning to a behavior modification technique. Basically what we're doing here is we're asking for a behavior that is incompatible with the undesired behavior, the one we don't want, and we're rewarding the behavior that we're asking for instead. And it can also be called operant counterconditioning, differential reinforcement of an alternate or incompatible or other behaviors. So you'll see those initials there. And again, this is where the terminology sometimes gets confusing, which is why I list these other potential names out for you. Example could be the cat who likes to run up and grab your leg as you're approaching or walking down the hallway. Instead, how about we ask that cat to go catch a toy? And the cat has the toy tossed, the cat runs to get the toy, and catching the toy at the end of the hallway is getting reinforced because it's a fun thing to do, rather than grabbing the person's leg. So, remember we talked a little bit about the law of effect when we were talking about operant conditioning. The law of effect can apply to shelter settings as well, and this is the place where frustration becomes really, really important. And this is where we have to think about when people start saying, oh, well, these poor shelter animals, I think they're really bored. Are they bored or are they frustrated? They're likely frustrated. They're motivated to do something, but because of the housing situation, they don't have the appropriate outlet to perform that behavior, that normal behavior. So with frustration can result in high arousal, which is really just an intense emotional state, lack of impulse control or self-control. And we can see things like swatting or biting while playing. You can see acute conflict behaviors like excessive vocalization. You can see things like reaching out and grabbing people as they walk by the kennel or the room, and even aggression, particularly with opening cage doors or putting the cat away, those types of things. And as you can imagine, it's really, really hard to ignore some of these unwanted behaviors. And so if you're trying to disengage that cat's claws from your arm as you pass by the cage, you have to interact with the cat. And that type of interaction, even if it's not the most pleasant, is still interaction. If the cat's that motivated, that desperate for social interaction, that's better than nothing, so the behavior gets reinforced. So I want to show you a couple of video clips. This is going to be a series of videos, and really what we're doing is we're teaching the cat a novel behavior, and we're going to use this in a situation where we might want to change the cat's behavior. Before we watch these videos, I want to point out to you, we're going to see George again. George has never been exposed to training. He's never trained before in his life. That preference test was the first thing that we ever did to figure out what he liked. So this is all brand new for him. And the person in the video who's training him is Dr. Harbison. She's an intern from California that came to spend a couple of weeks with us. She has also never trained a cat and has never done clicker training before. So we have a novice cat and a novice trainer working together for the first time. And these are real-time clips. This is the first time they've ever worked together. So I want you guys to see that even though you're not a professional in this, you can make progress. And there'll be a couple of mistakes here and there, and I'll point them out. But I think it's good to show you that even if you're not perfect, you can still help the cat learn. So you don't have to make this harder than it needs to be. So this is charging the clicker. We're using classical conditioning here to teach George that click equals food is coming. So we're just going to pair them together. So in that, you saw her click, and you saw her offer the food to George immediately following. So really all we're doing is making that perfectly predictive. Click equals treat each and every time. And you even saw George start to look at her hand when she started to click, saying, ooh, I think something good is happening now. The next thing that we're going to watch is we're going to watch capturing used to teach target training. So target training is really just touching a body part to a designated object. So here we're going to be using touching George's nose to the tip of a chopstick. And we're going to be using capturing. We're just going to stand here, offer the prop, and wait. And when he touches it, he gets cooked and treated.
Viewing.
And George figured out pretty good that it pays him in really big dollars to touch that stick with his nose. And it really only took a couple of repetitions for him to figure that out. And we might have had a little bit of timing issues with when she was clicking versus moving her hands, but you know what? Those are minor details, and George was still learning. So, again, we don't have to make this a situation where you're not comfortable trying clicker training or using positive reinforcement-based training with cats just because you're not a professional trainer. This next video we're going to watch is where we're going to actually start to put that behavior on a verbal cue. The verbal cue is touch, so she's going to say touch. She's going to offer the stick, and when he does it, she's going to click and treat. And it does need to happen in that order. Give the cue, then offer the prompt, and then when he does it, he gets a reward.
Go.
Touch.
Very good.
Touch.
Very good.
Touch.
So we're starting to get it on cue. George thinks this is an amazing game. I don't know if you guys are noticing that he's scooching closer and closer to the edge of the table in each of these video clips. He's having a really good time. And the next thing that we are going to watch is going to be taking this behavior that she just taught him and start to apply it to a situation that maybe we would want to modify his behavior. One of the things George's owner said to us was, you know, he doesn't really like having his nails clipped. I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah. Well, what does he not like about it? She said, well, he doesn't like to have his feet touched, and he doesn't really like the sight of the clippers. So we're going to take this behavior that we just taught George, and we're going to apply it to the clippers.
Touch. Touch. Touch.
So basically all we did was we replaced the chopsticks with the nail trimmers. And we asked him for the same behavior, and he's like, sure, I know this game. This is easy. No big deal. Those are clippers, whatever. I'm going to get my food for it. The cool thing about this type of training is that that's really, really forgiving. Really the worst thing that can happen is that you click on accent and the cat gets a little extra reward because you want to continue to pair your click with something good. Maybe we teach a superstitious behavior, or maybe we don't have our behavior quite as perfectly delineated as we wanted. But we can still make things happen with this. And these little behaviors that we can teach can be life-changing for some of these shelter cats, particularly the shyer ones. You know, just asking a cat to turn and look at you in a kennel so he starts to orient people walking by. Or teaching a cat to approach the front of the cage by using target training. Teaching a cat to wave, those types of things. We can actually save these guys' lives by just asking for a couple of really small, really simple behaviors. And as you can see here, it doesn't take that long to teach these. So as we said, a couple of different places where we can use operant conditioning or response substitution to teach a cat to go to place or go to carrier. These three kitties here in this photo are all in their particular station. You'll see they each have their own color. You can teach a sit. It's really easy to teach a cat to sit once you've taught them to target, because then you just hold whatever it is they're touching with their nose up over the top of their head until their rear hits the ground, and then you click and treat. You can capture eye contact, very much like we captured the targeting. Just sit and wait. When the cat glances at you, click and treat. You can teach them cute tricks, give a paw, fetch, spade, spin. And this is actually, even if you're not doing something to try to change a behavior problem, it's in and of itself an excellent form of enrichment. So even if the cat's not actually having a problem that you have to change, doing clicker training is a fun thing to do because it works their mind and is positive and consistent and safe. I got to help run a lab for the veterinary technician class when I was doing my residency at Purdue. And one of the things that we would do is we would go to the local shelter and work with some of the animals there. And one of the exercises that I had to do was to go into the cat room and clicker train a cat. Most of these students had had little to no experience with training and even less experience training cats. So this was completely novel to them, just like it was to Dr. Harveston. And the funny problem kept happening that they would start working with the cat and teaching him a behavior, come to the front of the kennel, target training, teaching them to give a high five to the cage, and when they came back the next week for the next lab, the cat would be gone. I'm like, well, this is dumb. We have to keep starting over every time we come back to the lab because the cats keep getting adopted. I'm like, well, guys, this is a good thing. You're doing these things, and it's making these cats more adoptable because they're coming to the front of the kennel and they're soliciting attention from potential adopters. So the fact that cats you are working with are no longer there means that this is working. And it was such a cool thing to see. And just to show you that, yes, it truly can be done, I have a video clip here of a cat going to her carrier on verbal cue. We had an intern also when I was doing my residency at Purdue who came up to me one day and she said, guess what? And I said, what? And she said, my cat can go to her carrier on cue. And I said, oh, yeah? She said, yeah. And I said, get me video, and then I'll believe you. And this is her cat going to carrier on cue.
Come on, let's go. Come on, we're going to work. You ready? Come on. Let's go to work. Come on, we're going.
So how cool was that? And she was actually not super interested in behavior. She was actually went on to do a residency in emergency and critical care. So training was not something that inherently came to her, but she taught her cat to go. And so now we have the video proof evidence that it can be done.